you heard or been told that the only way to cross stitch is with your fabric in an embroidery hoop? So like this. Well, it simply isn't true. And there are even reasons why you might not want to. So I thought I'd talk about the pros and the cons of using an embroidery hoop when you stitch, and then you can make up your own mind. Hi there, I'm Kat from Catkin and Lily, here to help you up-level your cross-stitch game with tips, tricks and tutorials so you can get the most joy from your stitching. Okay, let's dive into this fairly controversial issue. Now, it's really easy when you're new to cross-stitch to assume that putting your fabric in a hoop is a must-do, because so many cross-stitchers do this, and it's what you'll commonly see. But is it essential to put your fabric into a hoop to cross-stitch? Absolutely not. Which is why I want to dive into the reasons that you might want to do it, and the reasons that you might not. And then you can decide for yourself. Because I'm all about finding the way that you love to cross-stitch the most. And that might, or might not, involve an embroidery hoop. Now, spoiler alert, I don't ever use an embroidery hoop, so I'll show you at the end of this video what I do instead. Okay, let's start with the good stuff about stitching with your fabric in a hoop, and I have 3 reasons for you. The first is that it can be a bit easier to hold on to something solid like an embroidery hoop than just a piece of fabric, so some stitchers do find it easier. And that links into reason number 2, which is that it can help prevent hand fatigue if you find it easier to hold the hoop than just a piece of fabric. But the big reason is number 3, and that is tension, tension, tension. Because having your fabric in a hoop keeps it nice and taut, and that tension can help make your stitches look neater, it can make it easier to see the holes, and it can stop the fabric puckering up in areas where there aren't any stitches. So what about the potential downsides to using a hoop then? Well, the first is that hoops will leave creases and maybe even marks on your fabric. And even if you wash and press your finished piece, those can still be really quite stubborn to shift sometimes. The second reason is that you might find that it hurts your hand, so the exact opposite of what I talked about earlier. Reason number 3 is that it can be a bit trickier to run the thread ends in, because the hoop just gets in the way as you try and run the thread in at the back. The fourth reason is that it's a bit time consuming to put your hoop on and off for each stitching session. And if you don't do that for every stitching session, then that crease situation that we talked about earlier is going to be much, much worse. And the final reason is that if you like to take your cross stitch out and about with you, it's just more stuff to carry around. So for all of those reasons, I don't really like to use an embroidery hoop. I have tried them several times in the past, and I just can't get on with them. I find them really awkward to hold, they do hurt my hand, and I just find it too much faff. So that brings me to what you do if you don't want to use an embroidery hoop. Okay, so here's how you can stitch if you don't want to use an embroidery hoop. And it's what's called stitching in hand, which is pretty much what it sounds like. So hold the fabric in one hand and work the needle with the other. Like so. Now I really like stitching this way because I find that it feels like it gives me more control over where my needle's going. So I find it a lot easier to stitch like this. But that does also mean, you can see a potential downside here, is that my fingers are touching the fabric. So obviously I have to make sure that my hands are really nice and clean before I do this, and I would wash the finished piece afterwards. So you see, it's so simple, and I promise you can stitch in hand and still keep a nice even tension. In fact, I would even dare to say that just occasionally using a hoop can be detrimental to your tension if you get it too tight, or if you get it stretched more one direction than the other, and it can distort the weave of your fabric. So have I changed your mind about cross-stitching in a hoop? If you're a long-time lover of hoops, then I would guess not. But if you're new to cross-stitching, then I hope I've given you something to think about, and that you'll try stitching both with and without a hoop to see which you prefer. And do leave me a comment to let me know how you got on, or just how you feel about hoops. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to subscribe so you don't miss all the good stitchy stuff coming your way. Thank you so much for watching, and bye for now.